and got a quick technical.
Okay, that should be on now.
Are we good?
Oh, are we back? We're back. Excellent. Thank you for staying with us. Sorry about that short technical problem. These things happen. Anyway, to return to what Blanche was saying, we were asking her about why choose such a whole play, and then we went on to say there's been a big resurgence of interest in not just Oresteia, but in Greek tragedy generally. And you were explaining your thoughts behind this.
Well, I think there is something about a desire in drama at the moment for actually I think very strongly political, hard-hitting, uncompromising, difficult pieces of work that make you have a look at the broader realities of life. And I think there's something also about it's a kind of information overload that we get in modern life, that there are pictures and images and news and different sources of information coming at us from all over the place constantly, a sort of bombardment. And to sit down with a piece of drama that goes, you need to focus on this is important. I think that's very refreshing. I think people are finding it a refreshing thing to see.
And I mean, we've touched on the story of it, of the Oresteia, but the play's themes, I mean, you've sort of mentioned this a little bit. The play's themes, this is a play that is, it goes back, I think I said 2,500 years.
Yes.
Certainly the stories within it. What makes it relevant today?
Oh, so many things make it relevant today. I think if we're talking about themes, it's about the overriding theme is justice, and what is it, and what do we think it is? And so through the play, the idea of justice transforms, and at every point the audience is invited to judge whether they think this is right. And so the through the play we go from a kind of unthinking eye for an eye, vengeance is the only way of achieving justice, and gradually it moves into something much more nuanced, and we end with the invention of the first of trial by jury, which and the plays the trial in the play is very well, it's pretty flawed. So the people, the arguments on both sides.
The premise of the trial as well.
Absolutely, is but I think by the end of it, it's I think you're supposed to come out of it, I think, with a view on whether even a flawed trial by jury system is better than an unthinking law.
And what I noticed within having seen the play last night, you seem to sort of try and involve the audience. There's a lot of lights up over the audience, which in a traditional play, you'd be sit there in darkness.
Completely.
So that was a very deliberate, was it, to try and make them, and there's a lot of talking to the audience as well, and addressing the audience. So that was very deliberate.
It absolutely was. I think the Greek plays, when they were first written, and I coined this phrase, and I don't know if it makes any sense, but the way that I've been talking about it with the actors, that the audience are meant to use plays, Greek audiences are meant to use plays as a kind of engine for thinking, that you go in and there's a trade-off between the demands of your family and the demands of the state, or you go in and there is a trade-off between opening your heart to a new religion or trying to preserve order if it's an ecstatic religion. That's in the Bacchae, for example. And here you have this extraordinary evolving idea of justice, and also what the people get to decide, and the right to administer justice is handed over to the people of Athens at the end of the play. So they almost never work, Greek plays, in modern life, because audience expect to suspend their disbelief and to have this slightly more removed relationship with the drama, where the drama is played out and they sit back, and at the end of it they go, oh, I didn't quite believe that they were brother and sister, or whatever it is. But here the purpose of a Greek tragedy is to involve you at every corner.
And I was going to bring me on to my next question about using the chorus.
Yes.
Now, the chorus is a tricky thing for modern audiences, isn't it? And you made great use of it. And last night you had women and men, and and not just that, but having like phrases screened. And just looking over here, we have the stage and the big backdrop. So was there a decision at some point we said, no, we have to use the chorus, we're going to make this work?
Absolutely. I think it's again, there's something, if something is difficult, then I want to explore why it's there. And it tends to be that if something is the most peculiar aspects of the play are the ones which point you most clearly towards the nature of the play. So just going back to what we were saying before, that the fact that you're never allowed to suspend disbelief in a Greek tragedy, and that the audience is more intimate with the story than it usually is in modern theatre, I think was a reason to really try and push that as far as possible. And there is something about the having the voice of a group as distinct from the the voice of everybody, the voice of a distinct pressure group on stage as actively as one of the characters, being one of the characters, I think is completely fascinating.
Yeah.
The idea that a mob or a group or a lobby can be represented on stage as a single entity, I think that's amazing. I've never seen that.
And it wasn't just on stage, they were brought into the audience as well, and almost like members of the audience sitting, well, just a couple of seats away actually from people who had, you know, come here last night and paid their money, and yet there they were next to the sort of the voice of the play. I mean, was that something that you thought, no, we have to do this, they can't just be on stage, they have to be part of the auditorium?
Absolutely. I thought especially with the male chorus who sit in the audience, that that they are in the play, they tend to be analysts, they comment on the action, they what's the word, they take it and make a narrative out of it for us. And I thought for that to happen, they need to be in this privileged audience position, which is that they're sitting in the close to the stage as possible, but also they can turn around and talk to us.
So you have to make sure that people who are latecomers don't try and wriggle into their seats.
Oh, I know. Well, they could, but they'd have a hell of a time.
They're thinking they're sitting next to an ordinary audience member, and then suddenly they start chanting.
Well, there was a time when we were going to sell some of these tickets, and I was saying to the male chorus, you know, if you find yourself sitting next to somebody, just turn and chat to them, see what they think, because it's really interesting what they think.
Yeah.
But yes, that was exactly.
And it's a community chorus as well, isn't it? And I think 56 in total. Is that right?
It's huge, and they're volunteers. They've been working since
local
June.
people. Yeah.
All over Manchester. Yes.
And what was the thinking about drawing in the local community then to do that, rather than say auditioning professional actors?
Well, I thought it's there is something about. I think this is a specifically Manchester thing.
Yeah.
It's because Manchester has this extraordinary history of. Well, it's. I think I've said it before somewhere. Agitation for the public good. That,
all the way back to the Reform Act. And,
exactly. It's as in the history of collective social advancement, Manchester has this very strong, important place.
Yeah.
And I thought that was something. If we're talking about a play in which ultimately the people take on the right to judge, and it's a play which is written in the context of a very new. Very vigorous, invented democracy. That democracy was invented in Athens. Then it feels like the people should be making the show, and it feels very much like we shouldn't be parachuting actors in, going, "All right, people of Manchester, this is for you." We should be, as it was in ancient Greece,
and you had as well, even with some of the main actors, very northern accents as well. And in fact, we've
only got 2 Southerners in the cast.
Oh, have you?
Yeah.
Well, I was going to talk a little bit about the cast before we move on to your questions. And in terms of how you cast it's obviously quite a small core cast.
Yes.
But you have, and I made notice, you have Lindsay Marshall.
Yes.
It's Clytemnestra.
Yes.
Who has just been in From Darkness on BBC One. And if you didn't see it, she played a very sort of broken and quite sinister character. So she's instantly recognisable, but she's originally from the northwest, and
Simon Trinder's from Bolton.
So were you thinking, you know, we don't want to hear this sort of received pronunciation, we want to hear these northern accents in this very, very ancient play?
Of course, I had a conversation with them early on in rehearsals. I don't know why it should be that the voice of the Queen is naturally a London voice. I think I don't think that should be a received idea. And I'm the poshest southerner around, but so I don't really have any right to speak about this. But there's each city determines its own identity, and I felt very, very strongly that this should be made by the people for whom it is made. That there should be the strongest possible link between the cast on stage and the cast off stage, because it is about the identity of the city and about self-government. And
there's an accessibility, I suppose, to the play. If someone is hearing a voice that they hear from their next door neighbour.
Yes, exactly. And lovely and wonderful Danny Miller, when he comes on at the beginning and says, "This is what you need to know. This is the backstory, all right." And because he looks like the kind of guy that you could go down the pub with. You take it in a different way from him than if he'd stepped up all pompous and gone, "This is a very serious thing. You must be very."
Well, there were actually a few laughs, weren't there, in it? I mean, the way that the actors deliver some of the lines and the way they sort of talk to the audience. And there were people that were sitting around me last night who were, finding lots of parts of it extremely light-hearted in some ways.
I think there are. I mean, I do think when you're doing a tragedy, you need 3 or 4 bits where you can let off steam. Otherwise, people just you get a bit punch drunk. But I think those are in the Greek as well. It's there are little bits which are intentionally they lighten it so that you can think about it and then go back in. Because if you're having catharsis all the time, your brain switches off.
Okay, well, let's move on. Before we talk, which we will do in about 5-10 minutes, about any tips you've got for directing aspiring actors. So do send in your questions.
Yes.
If you would like some advice from Blanche. Now, we've had some questions already. So we have this from Georgina May T on Twitter, and she asks, what current issues have influenced your direction of the Oresteia, and which original contexts have seemed the most relevant?
Oh, interesting. Two very interesting questions. In terms of current events, current issues, the parallel that struck me most forcefully was the refugee crisis in Syria that's happening at the moment. It seemed to me that this is a play, among other things, that deals with the fallout of a terrible, destructive war, and some of the characters are refugees from that who've come here, or in the Oresteia, who've come to Argos as slaves and are working in terrible conditions, and that seemed to be a really interesting and rather horrible parallel with the situation that a lot of refugees are finding themselves in. Also, that a lot of the destruction that happens in the play comes from a very brutal war that's being fought at the beginning of the play and finishes just as we lock into it. So it seemed to me that if we were talking about if I was going to use the play to talk about the aftermath of an overseas war, which has a really unpleasant consequence, and also about the effect on ordinary people of this war, then that would be something very important to look at.
Okay.
There's a second part of that question.
Sorry,
yeah.
I jumped in too soon.
No.
No,
it was about the original context.
Yes, of course. Yes.
And I guess it's probably, I may be muddying your question a little bit, but the thing which is most interesting, I think, it's slightly what I was talking to Helen about a minute ago, that the play was made in order for the audience who knew the actors who were on stage at the time to discuss what they thought about it, and then all of them would go and be in government together, because that was the way the democracy worked. It was fully inclusive if you were a man, but with that proviso, with that exception, fully inclusive, that a play could absolutely change the course of the way that the city governed itself, because the whole city watched it, the whole city took it in, analysed it, and then the whole city would go and make laws and govern itself. So that seemed to me to be a really interesting thing to take on board.
Okay, and another question here from Sean Aiden, I hope I've pronounced your name correctly, on Twitter, and he asks, did you see the other productions of the Oresteia this year, or did you consciously avoid them?
I definitely saw them. I think you should. I think you should know what other people are doing when you do it yourself. If only, the worst thing that can happen is you go and see a play and go, that was really good, and you've taken all my ideas, all the things that I wanted to do. It's happened to me once or twice. That's a nightmare. The best thing that can happen is you go and see these other productions and go, fantastic, completely the opposite of what I think this play is. Wonderful. You have your idea, I have my idea, and in some ways it sharpens your thinking about what the play is.
Okay, and just a slight digression here,
Yeah.
but Quiet Man Dave has got a very good question. He asks, is there much innovative work from theatre makers today? I mean, he believes that to some extent there is, but what he wants to know is there still a place for very well written, what he calls pure drama? And I suppose he's really responding to the Oresteia here.
I guess so. I mean, I think there is a place for everything. I think there is absolutely a place for well written pure drama, and for drama which is simple text based drama as we understand it.
Yeah.
But I don't know if there isn't a lot of an overlap as well. I mean, Quiet Man Dave says, is it still there?
Sorry, Quiet Man Dave, I turned your question over.
Quiet Man Dave. Yes, there is a lot of innovative work, but a lot of the time, well-written pure drama and innovative work go together, they overlap, because a lot of really well-written drama is going to be innovative in some way, and a lot of innovative theatre making is addressing in a kind of in the round kind of way all the concerns that well-written drama is also trying to do. So I don't think there's a distinction between them. I think you're probably talking about theatrical innovation that seems to take away from the centre of the drama rather than adding to it. And I don't know. I think there's the useful thing about plays is that you can have 2 or 3, and I've seen versions of plays where I've gone, that's completely wrecked the text, but then it can come back again. The next one will be well written.
Yeah.
Well, it'll still be well written,
Okay.
but it'll be staged in a different way.
Great stuff. Well, thank you, Quentin Dave. We have a question now from R Drabs. I think you pronounce your name. That's very interesting. You're on Twitter. Thanks very much for your question.
I think I know who R Drabs is.
Oh, do you?
I think R Drabs is a chorus member.
Okay. Well, R Drabs. You asks, and actually something I really wanted to put to you as well. So thank you for your question. Why did you decide to have a man play Electra? And Audra says that he loves this, or she loves this, and Gary Shelford is fantastic and seems very comfortable in a dress.
Yes, Gary Shelford has played a woman many times.
Oh, really?
Gary Shelford played Mariah in 12th Night.
Okay.
So he knows
all about. He was saying, "Where's my girl's costume?"
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The thing about Gary Shelford's characters is all of them believe that a woman is less important than a man. That's the through line for his characters, and one of them happens to be a woman.
Yeah.
But because that was the thinking, I thought it would be important to have the same person play all of them, and because it's quite patriarchal thinking, it matters if a king is killed, it doesn't matter if a queen is killed.
Mm-hmm.
Then it seemed to me that it was appropriate for a man to play them. We've also got this is going into a slightly longer slightly longer thing where all the characters have got a through line. And
you have sort of you have played around with gender and the same actors playing different characters. I mean, that's quite traditional though, isn't it?
Completely.
In many ways. I mean, maybe it's not so much for modern audiences, but certainly at the time the play was written.
Absolutely, they'd all have been played by men. So the mask would have told you whether it was a male character or a female character, but you wouldn't have expected necessarily to have the character look like a man or woman. It would be the role that they had.
Okay.
But yes, the Watchman is a man and is played by a woman.
Yeah.
There's a lot of exploring of what people thought gender was all about in the play as well.
Well, this links a little bit to what Mol Barker, that's a good Twitter name, asks, and we've touched on a little bit, but what location and period of time have you set this version of the Oresteia in? And she also wants to, I assume it's a she, apologies if you're not she. How did you come to that decision?
Oh, yeah, very, very good question. The period of time is modern. There are some vintage dresses, but they're vintage rather than in a specific period of time. And the location is abstract. And the reason why is that I thought it's got to be clearly about Manchester today. And if I bring audiences to see a play which is everyone's wearing a toga, it's very easy to go, yes, of course, back in the day, but we're different now. But we still have economic slavery. We still have people trapped in jobs that they can't get out of, that don't support them. We still have this very strange relationship between violence, retribution, justice is not always done, and we still have a deeply patriarchal society. So I felt like those things we should be making it as modern as possible in that sense. That said, also there's a way of being so on the nose that you lose wider resonances. So what I wanted to do was to put it in a landscape where you read each element of the staging symbolically as well. There's a language where if you walk through a bead curtain, we know you're going to die or kill someone. If the blood is under the stones and it can rise up. So to allow for those broader and also those more supernatural elements as well, I felt like we should take these modern characters and put them in a plainer, more symbolic landscape.
Okay, and a question here from Adam B.W. Harris. Good question from Adam here. Why did you choose the Ted Hughes translation?
Because it's brilliant, because it's so punchy and forceful and full of drama and full of amazing images, and they resonate in your head. I had to cut it because it would have run at about 2 days.
It's 100 minutes, is that right?
It's 100 minutes, yeah. The cut version is the other one is
2 days is quite a long time for a play.
Absolutely, but there are pages I could cheerfully have stopped the show just to read out some of the pages of poetry that I had to cut. They were so beautiful. Go and buy the script. It's amazing. The full script is amazing. But yes, it's also intensely dramatic, and that I thought was a really useful thing to have in a text.
Absolutely. And we'll just talk a little bit about some tips for acting and potential directors out there, and do send your questions in about that. But if you want to ask anything about the Oresteia itself or anything else, just tweet us. As we said before, it's Ask Blanche is the hashtag. So before we move on to questions, You're young for a director.
I'm 35. Thank you for calling that young.
2012 is when you sort of people started to know who you are. And what advice do you have for people that go, yeah, that's what I want to do?
Oh, you have to really want it, and you have to really stick at it. If you do, it's fantastic, but it's a marathon game. I started directing in 2003. My first paid job was in 2012. So it's about having enormous patience. It's also about not giving up. It does come good in the end, but it's very, very, very tough before that. Also, the other tip is get a second job that pays you. It's you've got to have something to fall back on.
Good for journalists too. That advice. And this is from Natasha, and then Hyman. That's all on Twitter. Thank you for your question, Natasha. She wants to know, what are some of the pitfalls you fell into when you first started directing?
Oh yeah, very good. Very good question. There are a lot of pitfalls that I fell into because I am massively shy, and for the first 4 years of directing, I couldn't look an actor in the eye or finish a sentence when I was talking to them. So one of the pitfalls I fell into was not being clear. One was talking too much. Most directors starting out talk much too much when they could be letting the actor get on with doing some acting. And one of them was feeling like I had to have all the answers. And something that I've discovered is that if I go, oh, I don't know what that is yet, often the actor will go, oh, could I try this? And it opens something up for them. They also know that you are being honest with them, that we work it out together. So a lot of the time I felt like I was under pressure to be in charge. Whereas actually, if I had just said, let's all of us make this, then the room would have relaxed because they'd have known where they stood with me.
So just on that thought, we have a question here from Andy Routledge 1, and he says maybe you could talk about how it was different, say 3 or 4 years ago to how it is now. Did you ask the actors for the Oresteia to do any preparation tasks before the first day of rehearsals?
I didn't actually. For me, a lot of the time, I don't really know what it is until they get up on stage and start doing it. So it was useful. Obviously, I wanted them to read the script. I thought that was a useful idea. And I think that a lot of people did a lot of research on their own back. But I'm always very interested to find out what people bring into a room from outside. And I think I sort of feel like if it's going to be valuable, we should all be doing it together. So my poor assistant director was on, oh my God, her search history, hairy cysts, grieving Syrian widows.
Do you want to explain a bit more about hairy cysts?
Yes, hairy cysts. There's a moment, we have Furies in the play, and they have these long horror-style wigs. And there's a moment, it's a little bit of a flat cyst now because of the way that they physically shape themselves. But there was a moment where we were trying to make, you know, those dermoid cysts which have hair and teeth.
Charming, yes.
And sometimes eyeballs, and we spent a day in rehearsal. We spent a couple of hours in rehearsal trying to work out, because they've got all this hair, whether that was possible. So poor Cat was doing image searches. So I thought it's one of those ones where it would have been lovely to go away and say, look up hairy cysts before you start rehearsal. But firstly, I'd have freaked them out, and secondly, I didn't know I wanted to do it until the actors were in there talking about what kind of shapes they could make.
Okay, so what advice would you have for people out there who are actors, perhaps young actors, when they're working with a director? I mean, maybe you could answer that by saying, you know, what kind of actor do you like working with?
Oh, the kind of actors that I like working with, I think there are very few kinds of actors that I don't like working with. But the actors that I absolutely love bring a lot of ideas, try a lot of things, play in the room, ask a lot of questions, not afraid to go, oh, this feels a bit eggy, could we try something else? They bring a lot of thoughts themselves, and they also talk to me a lot. And those, I think, I don't know if this is actually true, but the impression I've got from talking to a couple of younger actors is that there's now there's an expectation in some places that you shut up and let the director tell you what to do, and that even if you don't like it, you just get on and absorb it and do it. And I think that's incredibly sad. I'd much rather have somebody who went, this feels horrible, so then, or can I try these things?
So you would encourage people to in many ways collaborate then with the director rather than just be waiting to tell where to go.
Oh God, this idea of directors being the godlike and actors as puppets is just so ridiculous and so awful. I'd much rather we all build it together.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's not me on stage. So and I've got to go, and the actors have got to own it. So to start that process by getting as much input from the actors as possible in rehearsal is something I really like to do.
Okay, and we have a question here from Twitter, which is Drake Katie 77. Thank you very much for your question. And she wants to know what specific challenges did you face when creating this particular production? And perhaps we could begin by talking about actually the set.
Of course, yes. Well, the challenges are that the production is huge. It's there are, I think Walter was saying yesterday, I think 90 people have worked on it. And probably 60 of those are on stage at some point. Yes, the set is enormous. There's a bead curtain which weighs probably, I don't know, half a ton, possibly a full ton, I'm not sure. If it came down your head, you'd be very unhappy about it. There's rubber crumb all over the floor, which is wonderful, but it soaks up the sound. So you have to talk in a certain way.
And quite difficult to run on, I suppose.
It's like running on sand. So if you're running across the stage, then you have to use different sets of muscles. So it's quite tiring. Physically, there's a lot of challenges, but those were when we got into the space.
Yeah.
The early challenges, there were 2 huge early challenges, and they were both about acting skills. And one of them is about how you put together a chorus, that everyone has got to think their own thing, but have the same idea to talk at the same moment and come in crisply together. And that's really difficult to do. Professional actors find that really difficult to do. So to do that with a group of untrained, ordinary people, non-professionals, who've got to do the thing which is possibly the hardest task in all of theatre, that was a challenge. And there's another challenge we were talking about earlier about the fact that this is very much it's a very non-naturalistic show as a Greek drama. That there's no point where the audience, sorry, I'm eating my own hair. There's no.
Sorry, it's nearly lunchtime.
Thank you. That's what I'll just get on with it. There's no point where the audience suspend their disbelief, because we all know that these are actors playing roles in mask, and it's all about us and what we think. And this is completely different from the usual way of acting, where you create your character. To some extent, you disappear into it, and you have your circumstances and your world. And so if there is no world and there is no character and the audience don't believe you, philosophically speaking, that's a tremendous challenge to get your head around. So a lot of what we did was how to make that feel comfortable.
Yeah, and on that thought, we have a question from Jodie Ratcliffe on Twitter, who's obviously been to see it and loved it. You'll be pleased to hear.
Thank you, Jodie.
Jodie says, I thought the stage design elements were very clever and striking. I totally agree with that. I saw it last night and thought the staging was wonderful. And she wants to know, did you ever have a go on the giant seat in the sky? And we should explain that there is a female actress who, for quite a lot of it, is on basically a big swing quite high up. And so if you don't like heights, you probably don't want to do that.
It was the first thing I asked her at audition. I might have to hang you 25 meters in the air. Is that okay? I wanted to. It's a lot of the things that are on this set, I suspect, come from things that I would really like to do myself. Yeah. So there's a lot of digging in the ground that goes on, which I kind of slightly want to get involved in that, and swing on a massive swing just immediately under the lighting
grid. Murder
grid.
Someone viciously on stage.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. So, don't we all?
Yeah, and I mean, actually, that was something I wanted to ask you. These plays are known as being very bloody because basically lots of people die horribly.
Yeah.
But it really happens off stage.
Yes.
And obviously that's traditionally how it would happen. But do you think people are coming expecting spurting veins and all that sort of thing?
Well, yeah, they might do. And I'm really sorry if you were expecting that. You get hairy cysts instead.
You get a lot of hairy cysts.
A lot of hairy cysts. Yeah. I think, because we talked about having the murders on stage, but there are 2 scenes in which the killing happens sort of emotionally before it actually happens physically. So both when he walks the red carpet, or when they both walk the red carpet, that's their deaths are being shown on stage in a very emotional way.
Because you know it's going to happen almost. So Yeah, okay. And we have a question here from Kat and then _IVGH. Thank you for your question. Now, we've mentioned a little bit about this, but if you could just expand on it. Kat says, what about the Oresteia do you think is still relevant today?
Oh yes, well yes, of course. We talked about the international situation before, and the terrible fallout that.
Do you think there are personal issues that are still relevant?
I completely think they do, and there are, and I think there's also. I was just going to say there's something about Manchester as well. The Northern Powerhouse conversation is going on at the moment, and this idea of Devo Max that you get, as I understand it, more powers but less money to put those more.
And you get a mayor, but even though Manchester voted against a mayor 2 or 3 years ago,
you will have
a mayor.
You will have independence.
Yes.
Oh, I know. But yeah, so there's this the idea of self-government and the idea of what a collective power, what powers a collective can take to itself. I think that's incredibly relevant for Manchester specifically at the moment. But you're right, there's an emotional thing as well. We talked a lot in rehearsal about truth and reconciliation commissions and what happens to the anger or to the destructive force that's unleashed when some violent act occurs. And one of the things that happens at the very end is that the Furies, who are this terrifying emotional force, they're called Furies because in the Greek the word is literally angries. They are angry. They
seemed pretty angry last night.
They were very angry last night.
Yes.
They were extra angry because one of them wasn't on stage because he dislocated his shoulder the night before because he was so angry. This is completely true.
He's being angry now. It's not
exactly
room.
Exactly. But how to deal with the forces that are unleashed by these acts of violence, I think is incredibly relevant today. It's still a problem that we're dealing with, and a lot of the play is taken up with attempts to dissipate this terrifying force and this awful weight of the past, these things that have happened that have to be dealt with, and they're dealt with by more murder, or they're dealt with by running away, or they're dealt with by different things.
It's like a domino effect of basically carnage, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. There's sort of building up cloud of carnage, and how to dissolve the power of that.
I suppose in Greek plays, no one's really ever let off the hook, are they? And is that appealing to you as a director? Yes,
I think there's something about even it's like whether you get off or not, you still have to carry it with you. And I don't think any of us are really let off the hook, probably by ourselves as much as anything else.
And this is slightly off topic, but I'd be interested to know what you think about arts funding, because it's something that is talked about constantly, and there have been fairly savage cuts to the arts, and particularly in the north when you compare it to, say, the capital.
Yes, completely.
How do you think that's affected culture in the UK?
Well, I think I'm worried about what it's going to do in the future, because at the moment, because the arts are largely vocational. You don't go into the arts if you want to make a bomb.
Yeah, you're not going to the arts to be a millionaire, are you?
You're not going to the arts to be a millionaire. And so there is this thing that's happening at the moment where people are trying to achieve the same results on less, that they're stretching themselves, they're working doubly hard to try and produce the same kind of thing. But I think there's going to come a time in a few years where the commissions won't have been made, so the new plays will stop happening, and that I hear it very strongly at the moment that it's increasingly difficult for working class actors or directors or writers.
We've had people like Judi Dench and various other Meeting McKellen say exactly that, haven't we? And I think, how would you get into it now if you haven't got a way of paying for it?
Exactly. And I think I'm hearing that a lot of drama schools are finding that it's very difficult because only people whose parents can afford it are coming through, and so there's a whole generation of talented actors that are getting lost to us because they're not being supported. Absolutely. When I was young, back in the day, when I was even 10 years ago, it was, as a director, you could do a play for £4,000 on your overdraft and it would be horrible, but you could probably make back in ticket sales that. And now it's 15, 16. And it means that people simply...
So it's tripled, basically.
It's tripled, exactly. And the opportunities are simply not there anymore.
And we have another question, thank you very much, from Natasha Hyman. She wants to know, what kind of director do you strive to be?
Oh, I strive to be a director that works well with actors. I strive to be a director who works as part of a collective. I strive to be a director who makes interesting, thoughtful, thought-provoking work. I don't think I'm ever going to be a director who's cool, because I have a tin ear for cool. I don't know what that is. This has always been the case, unfortunately. I was also the kid with no friends at school, but that was independently. That was different. So I don't think I'm ever going to be on the money. But what I hope I'm always striving to be is somebody where you go out going, that was strange and human, and it made me think.
Yeah. Okay. And just looking ahead then, are you able to tell us anything about what you're doing next, or is it all a bit hush-hush?
It's all a bit hush-hush, but I can tell you that I can go. I'm going home later today to my flat that I haven't been in for a month, and I'll probably get a takeaway and put my feet up. That's my immediate next plan.
That's your immediate next plan. That sounds like a very good plan. And obviously the Oresteia is on here for a while. We're hoping to see some great audiences. Has it been a very different experience directing in Manchester than, say, the projects you've done in London?
I love working in Manchester. Yes, you would, as Helen said before, I worked here on the birthday party at the Royal Exchange in 2013. There is something about. It's also been very, very obvious working with volunteers, with non-professionals. There's something about the openness and something about the open-mindedness and the warmth of Manchester as an audience, as a company, and as the city itself. And there's something also, even since 2013, it feels culturally much more competent as a place. Everywhere I go, people are going, but what about this festival? What about this concert? It feels like it has a sense of itself as a cultural capital, this city, which is tremendously exciting.
The phrase cultural renaissance of the North is bandied around quite a lot. Do you get a definite sense of that then?
Absolutely, I do. And across, not just in theatre, but in music, obviously, in the spoken word, all kinds of things. Across all areas.
And we have one final extremely serious question from Kevin Jameson, who I should point out is Home's senior producer, and he wants to know, it was press night last night, so how hungover are you?
I'm not going to lie, I feel rough. But I tell you what, I don't feel as rough as my assistant director, who was up at 10 this morning doing full-on physical work with a new group of Furies who are coming in next week. And I feel very, very sorry for her. She's in T2 at the moment, and she's probably green.
Okay, we have lots of water and Diet Coke, probably. Well, I think we should probably wrap it up there. And I'd like to say thank you so much for joining us today, particularly in a slightly delicate state. And
thank you.
Well done on press night. It was
you very much.
Enormously entertaining, and
thank you.
I hope that you should all come and see it. So
thank you for your questions.
Thank you for your questions. We've had a really good discussion, and don't forget, you can see the Oresteia here at home, and just checking here, it's on until the 14th of November, so plenty of time to come and see it. And I think there are matinees as well.
There are matinees
if you don't want to stay up late. So for more details, you can go to the Home website. Now I'll give you the address. It's homemcr.org, and then you flash the -Oresteia. And if you've enjoyed this Q&A, do subscribe to the Home YouTube channel. We have plenty more coming up. I've been Helen Nugent from Northern Soul. Thanks for joining us.